Chapter 5. The call came just after Salih had serviced him, a full rub-down front and back with a delicious finale. The girl's fine mouth and fingers drained the last of his travel tensions away, better than a hot shower and a stim shot ever could, the sweet's muted lighting and softly scented air giving the experience an air of privilege. Salih had offered to bathe him afterward, but Lucas Brigg knew better than to overindulge himself. He'd come to Zen's respite for business rather than pleasure, and he'd do well not to let the two entwine. Or not much, at least. He tipped her handsomely, and had just seen her to the door when the vidscreen started to chime. The coolly composed face on the screen belonged to Julia Russ, officially the Trisec Communications Coordinator for Weyland-Yutani's DS900s. Unofficially, she was ambitiously as ruthless as she was brilliant, a renowned company cannibal, and in direct competition with him for the next spot on the applications board. Not only was she a tremendous bitch, each meeting with her had led him to believe that women douched with liquid nitrogen, and found it too warm. He smiled pleasantly, perfectly aware that having to report to him was torture for her. The loathing was entirely mutual, and Rust hadn't been informed about the 949 situation until late in the game. Whereas I was there at the beginning, dear heart. Choke on it. "Lucas, I see you're getting settled in," she said blandly, her pale blue gaze taking in the silken robe and mussed hair. "If this is an inconvenient time, how nice of you to ask," he said, deliberately keeping his tone casual. If there was anything she hated, it was being taken lightly. "No, not at all. How are you? I haven't seen you since the last Earthside Con. Keeping busy?" Julia matched his smile, her eyes like chips of ice. "I'm well, thank you. I just received the numbers on our scan." "Don't tell me you're finished already," he interrupted. "My, isn't that adorable? You did your whole job just as quick as a tick." She gritted her teeth at him and continued. "And the ST signal wasn't picked up, which suggests that the exosuit was taken from the site prior to the explosion. The spread pattern is such that my people aren't able to trace passage, but we should now assume that at least one member of the team managed to escape, taking the Max with them." The short-range ST beacon couldn't be disabled, which meant that the Max had been taken. Someone had survived. It wasn't what he'd hoped to hear, but he wasn't going to let her see it. "Yes, we expected as much," he said, stifling a deliberate yawn. "Any pickups on the Nemesis?" "No. My field man believes that it was destroyed. It's always possible that they disabled the tracking boards, but it's unlikely. We'll keep looking, of course, but I think we can all do now is wait and see where they set down. If they set down." Briggs nodded. The joy of goading her was fizzling, his thoughts already turning to where their runner might be headed. If the Nemesis had been lost, the suit must have been taken out on a shuttle or a hopper, something small, or Julia's team would have spotted the trail. Disheartening news, considering how easy it was to disappear out in the DS sectors. But an emergency craft isn't likely to get very far, either. Zen's respite was close to where 949 had been, less than 3 days on his Sunjumper, and he'd come to the very slight possibility that someone on the Nemesis team might have made it out. Someone who'd had access to the trader's log. Someone who, if I can find them, if they have the information, and if I can make the deal, would absolutely assure my position with the board. "Worried about something, Lucas?" Julia asked sweetly. Briggs frowned, tilting his head to one side. "Actually, yes. You've been to Zen's respite recently." "Is Chin still cooking in the restaurant here? I heard a rumour that he moved when the company remodeled his kitchen." If looks could maim. Julia's composure slipped for only a second, but the pure hatred that flickered across her features was truly a sight to behold. She reached forward, and the screen went blank. Briggs grinned. Not even a goodbye. The pleasure was short-lived, quickly giving way to frustration. For a moment he sat and stared at the dead screen, searching for a way to hurry things along. He'd put Irwin and the guards on standby, and double-checked the channels were all straight-lined to him. And wait. I can wait, and hope that they turn up somewhere, company or friendly, that the manager bothered to read the alert, and that whichever C4 channel jockey picks them up has the sense to report it. A lot of ifs, a lot of hoping. Briggs sighed and stood up, already feeling like he needed another massage. He knew there was no point in worrying about it. They'd either turn up or they wouldn't, and he hadn't made it into the upper brackets of Weyland-Yutani by agonizing over things he couldn't control. And it wasn't as though Zen's Respite was such a bad place to wait. The company's complex had 4 excellent restaurants, a full holovid rec room, and was within easy distance of half a dozen highly ranked organic gardens. And there's the suite level staff, of course. Celie was able enough, but the brochure also listed several employees with skills and attributes that he wouldn't mind tasting. For 47 TS, he was in excellent shape, still perfectly capable of enjoying the satiation of his appetites. In fact, there was a particularly flexible young woman he'd heard about who could supposedly do things that he'd only read about. Briggs stretched his arms over his head and headed for the bathroom, deciding that he would relax. He always negotiated best when he was rested, and when the 949 fugitive turned up, he'd want to be fully prepared. Grigson had fumbled the ball, and he'd been given the opportunity of a lifetime. If he pulled it off, he could ride his own ticket. And if he fucked it up... Lucas Briggs does not fuck up, he said, his voice strong and even as he stepped into the elegant bathroom and tapped the shower to life. He didn't and wouldn't. Positive thinking, that was the key. And if his negotiation skills weren't enough to convince their wayward traveller, he'd resort to whatever method seemed appropriate. Humming to himself, Briggs stripped and stepped into the steaming shower. After a moment, he put a call into the service staff and asked for that flexible young woman to join him. As it turned out, she was able to make him forget all about DS-949, at least for a little while.